Hi, I'm Celine Perkins from Perkins Dry Goods. Welcome to part 3 of the Barn Stars Sew Along. We're going to be working on the corner star today, and a few things before we get started. One is this block is really simple, but it's really important to read the instructions. It's also really important to follow the illustrations in the pattern. So getting started with Unit A, we need to take the small background square, and this one is cut to 1/8 of an inch. That's another thing that's really important with Unit A, is that you need to cut to those 1/8 inch marks or measurements as you're directed in the instructions. This block is not oversized. So cut corner to corner, and you'll have 2 triangles, and these triangles have straight grain on the outside edge. Of course, the cross cut is where the bias is, so this is going to be really stretchy, which is why I recommend before you start cutting that you either use spray sizing or starch or best press on your fabric. It really helps stabilize it, and it helps you cut more accurately, especially if you're cutting 1/8 inch increments. You take the medium square that's from the medium fabric, and you place the triangle right sides together, aligning the raw edges on this corner. Then you stitch from the point to the end of the square, scant 1/4 inch. And then the trick here is that you're not going to press toward the triangle. You want to press toward the square. And the way that I trick myself into not messing that up is I put the unit on the ironing board with the fabric that I want to press toward facing up. So I set my seam and then just flip the piece back and press. Next, you're going to take another triangle. I like to lay these out the way they're going to be stitched, or the way that they're supposed to look after they're stitched. So this triangle needs to be facing this direction, so we have a long edge here. So I do this, then I flip the triangle over, and again I line up the raw edges. And what I find when I'm doing blocks like this is, so that I remember which side I'm stitching on, I'll put a pin in that side, so that reminds me when I get to the sewing machine that I'm going to be stitching along that edge. When you've finished stitching that, the stitches should line up where these overlap. Sometimes they don't, but most of the time they do. You'll just run the stitch right into this stitch here, or this little valley, and this this step on this unit, you press toward the triangle. So you've got one pressing toward the square, one pressing toward the triangle, and you get a little bit of relief here from some of the bulk. Next, you take the large dark triangle that you had cut from the square, and you're going to place these right sides together and align the raw edges. I like to sew with the pieced unit up. That way I can see where the intersection of the seams is, and I don't lose my point. If you have a sliver of this blue triangle showing, you want to follow the blue triangle. This one is cut the perfect size. This one may have been distorted a little bit from pressing, or maybe your seam allowance was off just a touch. But this is your proofing size. So this one looks pretty good. I don't think I'm going to have any trouble with having to, like if it were, you won't see it like that, but the important thing is that the raw edges on the corner, the short sides, is lined. So then stitch, and after that's stitched, you're going to press it toward the dark. Trim off your dog ears, and you make 4 of these for each block. This part of the sew along or the quilt, you need to make 2 blocks, so you make an 8 total of these Mary's triangle units. Now we'll work on part B. Part B is a quarter square triangle block, and it's made up of a background, a medium, and 2 dark triangles. You have squares in each one of these fabrics, and you want to cut them diagonally twice so that you end up with 4 triangles from each square. And you'll notice that the on-grain line is the long side of this triangle, and it will end up on the outside of the square, so there won't be any bias on the outside of the square. This is the unit that you really want to pay attention to being consistent with how you're sewing the triangles together and following the pressing directions, but more importantly is being consistent with how they the triangles go together. So you will take a light triangle and a dark triangle, and you want them in this order. Place the dark triangle right sides together, align these outer edges of this corner, and then you're going to stitch scant 1/4 inch down the side. This unit is oversized, so you will be trimming. When you are putting this through the sewing machine, make sure this dark triangle is on the top. The next unit you'll make is with the medium fabric and a dark triangle. You'll place the dark triangle right sides together on top of the medium fabric triangle. Again, align the edges and you'll stitch down this side. I mentioned in the last unit, I like to put a pin in the side that I'm going to be stitching because it reminds me to keep them going in the right direction, so then I don't have to resew anything. So you'll end up with a unit like this. Well, these units. The pressing is toward the dark triangle. Then you're going to put these together, right sides together with fabrics opposite. And the seams will nest in the center here. Then you're going to stitch scant 1/4 inch down the long edge. Now this is a bias edge, so be careful with it. Then you will press to one side. Actually, you're not going to press to one side. You're going to press this seam open. So you want to press this seam open. So you'll make 4 of these for each block, a total of 8 because you're going to make 2 blocks. Now to trim this block down, there are a couple of tools you can use. My favorite, which is the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer, will work on a unit like this. You will line up the stitching line with the size that you want to trim to, and in this case the vertical line will go right on your stitching where the 2 triangles are sewn together. And make sure everything stays lined up. Sorry. Then you'll cut the dog ears off. So now you have a trimmed 1/4 square triangle. And then you will press this seam open, as I said earlier. The next tool that you can use, if you have this, is it's a Quilt in a Day triangle square up ruler, which is another favorite of mine. It has, let me see if you can see it better on here. It has vertical and horizontal lines, and you can cut in 1/2 inch increments or whole inch increments, depending on what you're sizing to. You line up the vertical line and the horizontal line, so it really allows you to get the ruler placed in just the right spot. And there's that. This is a very handy tool. And then the final tool I have used, and I really like this one too, is the Tucker trimmer. It's a similar premise as the Quilt in a Day triangle square up ruler, but you can do other things with it too. But for right now, we're just going to focus on trimming this. And this also has a a half inch and whole inch side to it. You flip that around and you line up the cross and the vertical. And there you have it. Another trimmed unit. So this is part B, and as I said, you need to make 4 of these for each block, and a total of 8 for the quilt. Now we're ready to assemble the units. Lay them out in rows and take care to make sure that the medium or red fabric in the quarter square triangle is facing the center. Unit C is simply a square. There's no piecing to it. When you stitch them, you stitch 1/4 inch. The top row you'll press out, the middle row you press in, bottom row you press out. And I'll show you what the back looks like with all of this pressing you've been doing. So here's the finished block, and you'll see that this is where the quarter square triangle units were pressed open. This top row is pressed out, middle is in, bottom row is out. It helps with the bulk at the seams, and then your block will lay flatter. That's it for part 3 of the Barnstar Sew Along. Thanks for watching.